Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Thanks, John, Matt, and Mary for the invitation. I am truly honored to be here with you today. At Hopkins, part of the Democracy series, this is a place where intellectual curiosity and excellence is practiced in order to form students involved in citizenship, civility, and service. It is proper that we talk about democracy today after a year in which almost 100 countries throughout the world and half of the population of the world voted last year. While some were totally sham elections like in Iran, it is important to note that millions and millions of people went alone with a pen in front of a ballot and cast a vote to support or to reject a candidate. I'm here to share my story, but more importantly, to talk to you about something that each one of you have the power to do. And that is the defense of democracy and the pursuit of justice. You are the future leaders of the world. And it's so important that you understand the responsibilities that carry, not just as students, but as young people who can make a difference. I have lived through some unthinkable challenges in my own life. But I am here today speaking to you today because of one thing: hope in the restoration of democracy in my country and elsewhere. It is what has kept me going through the darkest time, and it is what I want to leave with you today. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. These words from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. resonates deeply within me, especially when I think about my home country, Nicaragua, and the struggles my family and I have faced. Nicaragua is a small country, and the struggles that we see are overlooked sometimes by the media or global discussion. But the story of Nicaragua is important because it is not just about one country. It's about all of us. The fight for human rights is universal. It's about freedom. It is about dignity. It's about justice for everything, for every human being, no matter where they come from or what their background is. Growing up in Nicaragua, I witnessed firsthand the oppressive grip of dictatorship. My family had fought these regimes for 4 generations. My father lived through a dictatorship that ruled our country for over 4 decades. And my uncle was imprisoned for more than 5 years and later killed by the same dictatorship. Since independence, Nicaragua had lived under authoritarian rule for over 89 years and counting, and my family has been part of the resistance for every one of those years. So I guess I am a democratic activist because of my genes, but also because of my spirit. I learned early on that in life, standing up for what is right often comes at a price, but it's a price worth taking. In 2018, the government of Daniel Ortega, who has been in power for decades, reformed the country's social security system, leading to massive protests across the nation. People were angry, elderly citizens, high school students, like you, university students, workers, the entire society, for violations of their rights, electoral fraud, and corruption. When I joined the protest, I became part of a movement that demanded democracy, but instead of listening, the regime responded with violence. They fired live ammunition against the crowd and the protesters, killing hundreds and wounding thousands. For me, that was the moment I decided I had to do something more than just speak out. With a group of leaders, we founded the Civic Alliance for Justice and Democracy, a group that led the opposition to Ortega's government. We faced threats. We faced imprisonment, but we also experienced something more powerful than fear. We faced the hope for the rebirth of democracy in our country. Dr. King says, the time is always right to do the right thing. That's the lesson I want you to take with you today. Standing up for what is right doesn't depend on timing. It's not about waiting for the perfect moment or for others to start. It's about doing it now, even when it feels difficult or uncomfortable. Every action, no matter how small, counts. For example, I regret of not being active in politics before the crisis erupted and we were already witnessing the erosion of democratic institutions in my country. The fight for democracy is never easy. It comes with great sacrifices. Since 2018, as a member of the opposition, I have been subject to countless threats, beatings, and harassment by government sympathizers, paramilitaries, and the police force. Without any legal basis, I was first prohibited to leave my country. Then, I was prohibited to leave the capital city of Managua, and eventually, I was prohibited to leave my own house. In January 2021, I announced my candidacy for the presidency of Nicaragua. I knew the possibilities of winning the elections were extremely difficult, as the dictator will commit electoral fraud again. I ran because I had to be coherent with my democratic principles. I called people to vote for a change, despite the difficult conditions. On the night of June 2021, dozens of police officers stormed my house, arbitrarily arrested me, and took me to prison. My wife and daughter had to escape Nicaragua 2 weeks later. While in prison, I was subject to enforced disappearance. Enforced disappearance for 90 days. During this time, I was denied family visits. Communications with the outside world were denied, as well as access to legal counsel. My trial took place in prison, violating Nicaraguan law and international standards. All of the witnesses were police officers. I was not allowed to communicate freely with my lawyer until the very same morning of my trial. In January 23rd, 2022, the day of my birthday, I was sentenced to 13 years in prison for so-called crimes against the homeland. I spent almost 2 years in prison, separated from my loved ones, cut off from the outside world. But in those 2 years, I learned more about myself, about resilience, and about the importance of solidarity. The most common question I'm being asked, and I'm sure you will ask at the end of the presentation, is what is it like to be almost 2 years behind bars, especially if you are innocent. The prison was a highly security prison built after the 2018 protests to accommodate more prisoners because of the protest. In prison, every international regulation known as the Mandela rules were violated. We faced degrading treatment, discrimination, especially against women, and were isolated from the outside world. We were denied reading and writing materials. So think again when your teacher asks you to read a book next time. Our sleep was extremely difficult as we were under 24-hour, under light, artificial lights, and at the same time we were denied sunlight for weeks on end. As I mentioned earlier, family visits were infrequent. In total, we spent 6 months without seeing our families. There were no letters or books allowed. Medical attention was inadequate, and tragically, one of our fellow prisoners died under custody due to the lack of care. Similar conditions were poor in sanitation, and the food was insufficient, causing weight loss and disease. Some prisoners endured extended solitary confinements, and others were placed on punishment cells for months, confined to small places without ventilation. Interrogations were relentless, sometimes several times a day, especially after the detention. There was no privacy, no dignity. Religious ceremonies and the Bible were prohibited. We were also denied access to legal documents about our cases. As I mentioned before, there was a strict ban on communication between us. The only exception was speaking in a very low tone within ourselves. The conditions were designed to break us, to limit our ability to communicate and to share thoughts and plans. We solved this issue of communication by learning sign language, and we became very good at it. So, how does one survive in such conditions without losing their mind? For me, it was a combination of intense physical and spiritual exercises. From Monday to Saturday, I would walk from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. This involved 3,000 rounds in my small cell and 700 push-ups. We prayed the rosary twice a day. Sundays were reserved for cleaning myself and resting. I also meditated for about an hour on Sundays, while my daughter would light up a candle at the grotto at the University of Notre Dame, a sacred place on campus where she was studying. This routine kept me focused, keeping worries and negative thoughts at bay. Negative thoughts are very common in prison, even if you are innocent. For example, I started to realize how my fight for democracy and decisions were affecting the people that I love the most. A sense of guilt plagued me as my wife and daughter were suffering for the fight over something I consider important, but it was extremely costly to my family. I felt selfish for not putting family first. Conversations with my cellmates were another way to pass the time. We shared our stories, learned the names and histories of our families, and grew stronger in solidarity. In prison, we were all political prisoners, 120 at its peak. It was a strategic mistake of the regime to put all of us together in the same facility because rather than breaking us, it only strengthened our commitment to democracy and our support for one another. Prison has a profound effect on those who endure it for a long period. I believe it can either make a person stronger and more compassionate, or it can awaken the worst in someone, like it did to Ortega, who spent as a political prisoner 8 years of his life. For me, prison made me realize the true value of life and the consequences of every action. The beauty of the sky that I could not see, and the embrace of a loved one, which I could only experience every 6 weeks, or sometimes even longer. It reaffirmed my commitment to justice, not driven by revenge, but by the need of reparation. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. This quote from Dr. King carried me through my darkest moments in prison. There were many days when I couldn't see the end of the struggle. I didn't know when I would get out, but every day I took the first step of those 3,000 rounds in my cell. I hold onto my faith in justice, faith in my family, and faith in the idea that one voice, one action could get me out of there. One of the most painful moments in my life was not being able to attend my daughter's high school graduation ceremony. We have received the good news that she had been accepted to Notre Dame, and it filled me with pride. However, this news became my main burden after my detention. During the 3 months I spent in isolation, I had no idea what had happened to my family. I was tormented by the thought that Isabel might have decided not to attend school in order to stay behind with me. At the first family visit, I was relieved to learn that she had already begun her classes. Later, I found out that while she had hesitated, she knew very well how excited and proud I was that she would go and be studying architecture and how much education meant to her parents. Despite the difficulties and anxieties about my situation, she started her education. She was welcome on campus, and now, as a senior, we are extremely proud of her. A special mention must be made to the family members of victims and the values that they can make towards the liberation of their loved ones. My wife, Victoria, played a fundamental role in our liberation, as you could see in the video 60 Minutes. After leaving the country, she embarked in a tireless campaign denouncing at every forum, at every city, every parliament that she could go. Nobody can be a better champion for liberty than a suffering relative having the courage to speak in public, to denounce in a parliament, or talk to a camera. Victoria learned all this with the solidarity of organizations throughout the world. A businesswoman all her life, Victoria did not have the experience nor the preparation to do all this. Her love and motivation made her learn rapidly, and the public was able to see the dramatic transformation from a troubled wife to a human rights champion. She became the voice of thousands of voiceless relatives who were not willing to speak out of fear of retaliation. Dear students, you are a very important and critical moment in your life, especially juniors and seniors. You will have to make important decisions that will impact the rest of your life. You may feel not necessarily sure of what to do or if you have the capacity to do it. You have the capacity to do whatever you can and you wish if you have the motivation, the energy, and above all, the hope of achieving tasks that may seem impossible. The transformation of my wife is evidence that with hope and determination, the goals can be achieved. It wasn't just my family who supported me in my fight. I was not alone. I had fellow political prisoners, brave individuals who endured similar sufferings. We found strength in one another. We lift each other up, even when we were locked in the darkest places. Liberty came finally on February 9th, 2023. We were awakened in the middle of the night, placed on buses, and never told where we were headed. After an agonizing half an hour, we arrived at the airport. There, a plane awaited us to carry to the United States. Our misery had ended, and a new life was beginning. That same day, I was reunited with my wife and daughter, nearly 2 years after being separated. I am now in the process of seeking justice. Like the road to democracy, the road to justice can be long. It's filled with setbacks. It's filled with hard times. And there are days when it feels like nothing is changing. But let me tell you this, justice will come. It might take time, it might take effort, but it's coming. I want you to understand something very crucial. You have the power to make a difference. You might not face the same kind of persecution that I have, but there will be moments when you will need to stand up for something's right. And it's not always going to be that easy. I have lost many things in this battle for democracy. I have lost, so to speak, almost 2 years of my life. Family memories that I will not live. My house, my country, my citizenship. But they could not take my determination, my will, and my hope. Right now, there's still no democracy in Nicaragua. Does that mean that I have failed? Absolutely not. This is where hope plays its role. It is hope that keeps me active every day, even when the path is unclear. Hope feeds resilience. Hope is the belief that something better is coming. That something better is possible. In those moments where nothing seemed certain for me in prison and for my family in exile, hope became the anchor and gave me the strength to keep going. It is because of hope that I'm speaking to all of you as a free man, and it is hope that will bring democracy back to my country. You have something very special here at Hopkins, an education that empowers you to think critically, to speak out, and to act with courage. The values you learn here involve citizenship, civility, and service are not just words. They are the foundations of the future you are building and the foundation of a good society. You are learning how to be leaders, not just here at school, but in the world. And one day, when you face these moments of decision, when you see injustice happening, I hope you were able to say the time is always right to do the right thing. If you think democracy is the act of voting, you're wrong. It is true that there cannot be democracy without voting, but democracy is more than cast a vote every 4 years. Democracy is a way of living, of acting at every moment, to be an activist, to engage in common problems, to mobilize. That is why the action by the informed citizen is so important. There's nothing worse against democracy than indifference, inaction, or call to moderation in the face of injustice and violation of rights. It is crucial that you are well informed of what is happening in the world. Again, quoting Dr. King, shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding of people of ill will. Your voice matters. Your actions matters. You have the ability to change the world for the better. You are the generation that will continue to fight for democracy and justice, that will stand up for oppression and difficulties and injustice. If you do, generations to come will thank you for inheriting a good system of governance, one in which nobody can be above the law. Then a final thought about democracy that I think is extremely important. In addition to all the efforts we might do in defending democracy, democracy's greatest ally, democracy's greatest force lies in the heart of the individual, in the desire for freedom that derives from our own instincts. Dictators try to assault the minds and the hearts of its citizens, but a person pretending to rule forever cannot repress the desire of the people to be free. That is why dictators feel fear out of the people. We should exploit that fear into our advantage, giving strength, motivation, and power to the human will and the natural desire to be free. So remember, in times of struggle, always have hope. Injustice in a faraway country affects all of us. This is a time to act, have faith, keep moving forward, one step at a time, and never, ever remain silent when you see injustice around you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.